The United States is asleep at the switch. And people who listen to your podcast are like, no, I'm angry. I'm doing something. You're not doing enough. I don't care what you're doing. You're not doing enough because we're going to lose this country.
Hello, and welcome to the Politics Girl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. So when things are this crazy, when the news is this never-ending onslaught of shocking and unprecedented chaos, when everything you know about how things work seems to be up for debate, it's difficult to know what to do. Honestly, it's hard to even know what's going on. So today I thought we would take a step back and look at what's going on from a 30,000-foot view so we're all on the same page. To do this with me, I've asked my friend David Rothkopf to join us, as he is not only a foreign and domestic policy expert, but a man who's really excellent at seeing the big picture and asking the hard questions. In full transparency, this podcast was recorded on Friday, March 28th. For those of you who don't know David, he is the CEO of the Rothkopf Group, best-selling author and journalist, and host of the Deep State Radio podcast. He is also someone who truly understands government, having served as Deputy Undersecretary of Commerce and International Trade Policy in the Clinton administration, as well as working as a professor in international affairs at Columbia University, Georgetown, and Johns Hopkins. He is a contributing columnist to the Daily Beast, a member of the board of contributors of USA Today, and has authored hundreds of articles for multiple publications. I'm hoping we can just go through some of the top lines of what is happening in America so that you are prepared with the information you need to go forward. Knowledge really is power, and I want you to feel powerful right now. So without further ado, please welcome best-selling author, international expert, and brilliant thinker not afraid to face the truth, David Rothkopf. Welcome back, my friend.
It is good to be back.
Well, thank you for coming. I wish it was under better circumstances. Donald Trump has been president for 2 months, and our country is quantifiably worse in every single way. We are weaker, we are less safe, we are poorer, we are abandoning our allies and embracing our enemies, the economy's tanking, our human rights are being abandoned, and we are seemingly being run by wholly incompetent, cruel, greedy self-dealers. So what is your initial take on where we sit here 2 months into the second Trump administration?
Well, you've got me pretty close to tears there with your intro. I mean, I think you've put your finger on it. I mean, that's where we are. And I think one of the most important things we can do is recognize how extraordinary the moment is, how different this is from anything we've ever been through, from anything we've ever experienced as a country. This is not going from some Democrats to some Republicans or having a debate over whether we should have Obamacare. This is an administration that is actively seeking to destroy the institutions of our government, fundamental freedoms, the structure of the international community, to redo who we are allied with, what we stand for as a country. And every day it gets worse. And, other administrations move a little more slowly than this one has because they stop to obey the law. These guys don't care about the law.
That's one of the biggest things for me is that we're watching the dismantling of so many institutions, but to watch the destruction of the rule of law, it makes the ground shake under you. We could have a discussion about if the Department of Education is bloated, but we can't have a discussion about if you can just pick people up off the street and send them away to foreign prisons without trial. To me, that's two completely different extremes. And let me ask you about what's happening with these arrests. And I use that term loosely because many of these people are being taken off the street without a warrant, without just cause, in many cases by plainclothes, masked assailants claiming to represent our government. Do you think this is a test to see how Americans respond to public kidnappings, to see what we do if we don't do anything, that we're teaching them what they can get away with so they can expand their list of who gets taken, from immigrants and visa holders to green card holders to citizens to anyone who they consider an enemy of the state? You're someone who thinks about these big questions. Where does this go from here?
Well, I don't think it goes anywhere good. I do think it's a test. I think it's an effort to redefine the way the government works. And I'm not 100% sure how much they care about how people react to what they're doing. I think they care about, whether impediments arise from the courts, perhaps, whether the Supreme Court ultimately lets them do what they're doing, and perhaps some political impediments that may threaten the rest of their agenda. But honestly, even in those cases, when you have a president who has immunity and essentially unlimited pardon power to grant to all the people that works for him, we're in a new place. He is acting like a king. And these people, this woman who got picked up at Tufts University apparently got picked up because she wrote an op-ed with two other people that was pro-Palestinian. She was not pro-Hamas, and they stopped using the terrorism language. Yesterday when referring to this, Marco Rubio said, well, if people come here and cause a ruckus, we're going to get rid of them. Cause a ruckus?
That's me, babe.
Yeah. Well, exactly. But the point is, we have freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, and it's written right there into the First Amendment to the Constitution. These are founding principles. This is how the country got started. And there, as you say, and I think you're very right to point this out, and a lot of people aren't pointing it out. If it's pro-Palestinians today, what is it tomorrow? Another woman got arrested this week or stopped at Logan Airport, a Russian doctor at Harvard Medical School, and is likely to be sent back to Russia right now. And she's been a Putin critic. So are we now going to be rounding up people for totalitarian dictators around the world and sending people back? I mean, isn't this the opposite of the idea that actually led to us, getting the Statue of Liberty, the concept behind the Statue of Liberty, that we would embrace people from elsewhere in the world who were subject to tyranny, subject to the kind of abuse that's happening here now. And I just think it'll go further and further. Will they? I mean, there's a pattern. It's not just those people, right? Look at what's happening with DEI. Look at what's happening with scientific research. Look at the things that have been taken down off of websites. This is a systematic effort to wage a war against knowledge, to wage a war against facts, which is what fascists do, totalitarians do. They say, I'm going to set the narrative. I'm going to lie to you, and I want to get rid of anything that might, get in the way of people buying my lies. I'm worried where that goes. There was another woman, a French person, coming here for a conference, and she was denied entrance into the country because on her phone, she had statements that were critical of the Trump administration. Meanwhile, there are other people in the Trump administration who are looking at ideas like denaturalization, taking people's citizenship away so they can be kicked out of the country. Well, combine those two ideas and combine them with the police state tactics that they're using. And, people getting not just tossed out of the country without due process, tossed out of the country and put in an El Salvadoran prison, a hellhole from which they may never escape without any due process. This is when people go to me and they go, well, we really need, I have a lot of centrist friends, and they're like, well, we got to find common ground.
Common ground with people sending you to an El Salvadorian prison when it's known for human rights violations? There's no common ground there.
There is no common ground. It's like, what are you going to do? Compromise on a bigger cell? I mean, this is ridiculous. What do you common ground with a tyrant? Well, I'd like slightly less tyranny, please. This is ridiculous. And by the way, I think there's some Democratic leaders who deserve criticism because they're taking a kind of soft attitude to this because they think they're still in 1985 or something, while these guys are dismantling our government, imposing police state tactics, make it illegal to have ideas they don't approve of. I mean, what did you think last night? Trump put out an executive order saying we have to get rid of the bad ideas, the political indoctrination at the Smithsonian Institution and, wait for it, the National Zoo. I mean, what's the problem there? The pandas are black and white. They just want all white pandas. I mean,
The pandas are also Asian. They're black
yeah,
and white and Asian. So
and they want
that's
to
all
get
DEI. That is a
yeah.
DEI animal.
That exactly. We got to get rid of those DEI animals. I guess we get polar bears or something like that.
I was reading about the Smithsonian thing and I thought, does this man actually do any work? Does he know what the president's job is? Because it's not to go into the Smithsonian and start taking out exhibits. Like, that's not the president's job at all. You know what I mean? Like,
well, he actually doesn't have any authority to do what he's saying. But this gets back to my point about the law. He doesn't care. Garrett Graff, who's a good writer about, these kind of things, wrote a social media post this morning in which he said Trump realizes now that executive orders are like, he didn't use this term, but it's like supercharged, truth social posts because they get so much attention. And the fact that what he is suggesting or saying he's going to do or ordering, he doesn't have the power to do. He doesn't care. He doesn't have the power to change how states conduct elections. He doesn't care. He doesn't have the power over the Smithsonian. He doesn't care. He's just going in because he wants to create the illusion of action, even if he doesn't actually get some of it done.
Well, the thing is that I think the problem is that, yes, no, you can't just rule by executive fiat in a constitutional republic that we have. That's not how the Constitution is set up. It's not how it's supposed to be. The legislative branch is in charge of our laws. And yet, if he is surrounded by people who tell him yes to everything he does, that say, yes, of course we'll do that. Yes, of course we'll do that. Like, I keep thinking about the courts holding the line for us right now. Like, the Republican-controlled legislative branch has clearly abandoned their responsibilities to the Constitution, and they're letting the executive branch and Trump's EOs just run roughshod over them, making the hundreds of laws by executive order, which is not at all how it's done. So the courts are upholding the law and putting stays on some of these EOs and saying people don't have to comply and saying turn around that plane where you have these people deported. And in many cases, the Trump administration just seems to be ignoring the court rulings, which puts us into a constitutional crisis world, right? But even more frightening to me is the recent sort of stance of Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who's now saying that Congress might just have to defund the courts that don't comply with Trump's orders. He might just have to shut down entire circuit courts if those judges don't uphold the president's wishes. And that's completely outrageous. Like, yes, Congress is a check on the courts, but the idea of Congress just shutting down the courts or firing judges or changing things so that Trump just gets everything he wants is a massive overstep on the speaker's part. And it should be setting off major alarm bells for everybody in this country.
Yeah, it's tyranny.
Yes.
It's despotism. They're acting like dictators. They're doing what Putin did, what Orban did, what Erdogan has done in Turkey, what Netanyahu is attempting to do in Israel. And there is a group of these countries, and we are now part of that group, that are ethno-nationalist. In other words, they're playing a nationalist card, and it's often racism underlying it, and anti-democratic. And it is trying to push the world away from international institutions and away from international law to a world of strongmen, of autocrats who get to do whatever they want, however they want, who resolve their big disputes with either corrupt deals or with wars. And that's where they want to head everything. And, you're right to bring this up, because too much of the stuff I read in the press is like, Mike Johnson has made the following statement in and it's like, oh, this is the same old. And it's not. Donald Trump said this week, every week there's stuff, right? He said this week, I would like to pay reparations to the January 6th rioters. He wants to pay the people who attempted a coup against the United States government. Well, why does he want to do that? Because he wants them to be his private army, to do his bidding, to make elections harder for people. And we could think of 100 examples of this. And by the way, I'll go back to your point about the test. Let's just start very early on. The Congress passed a law. I didn't particularly agree with the law, but the Congress passed the law. The law was that TikTok had to divest from the Chinese, be divested, or shut down. And Donald Trump, in his first 24 hours in office, said, nah, we're not going to enforce that law. I'm going to go cut my own deal. And nobody challenged him. Right then, within 24 hours, we were saying, oh, the laws don't matter. And, the Congress, as you say, they appropriate funds, right? That's the law. They write the laws, they appropriate funds. They are the only ones who could create or end the Department of Education. But Trump puts out an EO saying we're going to get rid of it, and then uses all sorts of kind of nefarious techniques to get rid of it in everything but name only. We're going to stop directing the funds. We're going to fire people. We're going to block these kinds of things. And they're doing that across the government. I mean, today there's a story. Elon Musk wants to change the computer system at Social Security. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to keep people from getting their Social Security money they depend on for a couple of months. Now, I think it's politically insane, right? But the point is they're using tactics to achieve what they want outside the law, regardless of the law, in spite of what the laws are. Just every place they can do it, they're doing it.
It's pretty sickening. I'm having a really hard time with it because it, like I was saying earlier, it's very difficult to function in a time where there is no rule of law. Like Steve Schmidt wrote on Substack that one of the things that makes Trump so deadly is that he's surrounded by imbeciles and extremists and yes men and people that are mostly incompetent, that these are the people telling him yes. These are the people giving him advice. These are the people who hear what he has to say and don't question him. This is not a group having debates or analyzing issues. They have no grand plan aside from usurping power and never giving it back. And that's the thing. It's like we talk about, like, you get rid of Social Security. That is politically toxic to do something like that. And yet it feels like they don't care. The whole idea is to dismantle the government, make it not work, then privatize whatever they can to make money, to pull in more money, to make us all desperate and poor. And like, we'll just depend on our strongman leader to give us whatever he can take. But like, when I think about this government not giving power back, because often when people talk about like, oh, the 26 election or the 28 election, I'm like, oh, that seems like 100 miles away because there's so much that could happen before that. But I think about Trump's recent executive order saying that anyone who votes needs to have proof of U.S. citizenship, or the next EO that was talking about getting rid of voting by mail, because this is basically the SAFE Act, but in executive order form, because the Republicans are never going to get that bill passed through Congress. And it's really a bill specifically designed to disenfranchise voters, but Trump has signed it as an executive order. And if the courts don't stop it, then it really will affect how people can vote. And I feel like, okay, there might be something positive there because they are still concerned about people voting, that they want to suppress our votes. But B, this is what they're doing. They're trying to not only disrupt the entire government, but also make sure we can't vote. Like the SAFE Act is terrible, and it was terrible when it was a bill in Congress, and it is terrible now that it is in EO form. But basically the idea around it is that you have to prove citizenship, right? That this idea that it reads like a voter protection bill, like the government is just trying to make sure that only American citizens vote, which, to be clear to people who are listening, is something we already have thanks to the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996. That bill itself prohibits non-citizens from voting, and it comes with punishment of prison or a fine or deportation. But like, we don't actually have a lot of non-citizens voting. I think the Brennan Center said it's something like 0.0001% of people who try to vote who aren't citizens. So it's like a negligible amount. It's never been a problem. And the Republicans have always said it's a problem. They try to pass bills to make it harder and harder for people they don't like to vote. And in this case, if you have to prove citizenship, you're going to need a passport to vote. And only 51% of this country has a passport. And a lot of those people are children of passport holders. They're not voters, right? So let's make the number 40%-ish. We're not solving a problem. They're making a problem that they can then keep people from voting. And in this case, the citizenship thing, it's people that can't afford passports, people that can't go and get passports, people that can't show two forms of ID that match if they don't have a passport, because most women who got married, it doesn't match, right? So like my birth certificate is not going to be the same as my married name. So then they don't match. So then I don't qualify to vote. This is the kind of thing that they're trying to do right now. And I find it interesting, on top of acting like dictators, they're trying to work within our system still to stop us from getting them out of power. Does any of that make sense to you? Are you one of those people that needs complete darkness to sleep, but your blinds allow light around the edges and it's never quite dark enough? Do you find yourself in 2025 with blinds from 1995? Well, there is a better way to buy blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery, and it's called 3-Day Blinds. 3-Day Blinds are the leading manufacturer of high-quality custom window treatments in the U.S. 3-Day Blinds has local, professionally trained design consultants who have an average of 10-plus years experience that provide expert guidance on the right blinds for you in the comfort of your home. Just set up an appointment and you will get a free, no-obligation quote the same day. If you're not very handy, or even if you enjoy DIY projects but know that measuring and installing blinds can be a challenge, let the expert team at 3-Day Blinds handle the heavy lifting. They design, measure, and install so you can just sit back, relax, and leave it to the pros. Check out 3-Day Blinds on Instagram and you can see that they've got thousands of options that fit any budget and style with actual samples so you won't have to be guessing about what your blinds will look like. And 3-Day Blinds has been in the business for over 45 years, helping over 2 million people get the window treatments of their dreams, so you know they're a brand you can trust. Right now, get quality window treatments that fit your budget with 3-Day Blinds. Head to 3dayblinds.com/politicsgirl for their buy one, get one 50% off custom blinds, shades, shutters, and drapery. For a free, no charge, no obligation consultation, just head to 3dayblinds.com/politicsgirl. One last time, that's buy one, get one 50% off when you head to the number 3, dayblinds.com/politicsgirl. This episode of the Politics Girl podcast is brought to you by Wild Grain. Wild Grain is the first baked-from-frozen subscription box for artisanal breads, pastries, and pastas. Wild Grain boxes are fully customizable to your taste and dietary restrictions, and in addition to their classic variety box, which my family gets, they've also launched a new gluten-free box and a plant-based box that's 100% vegan. I love having fresh baked bread, and it's always ready to go in under 25 minutes. I like the sourdough bread and the baguettes, I love their cookies, and to be honest, I would eat a fresh croissant every single day if I could. I am not much for breakfast, but coffee and a warm croissant, that is right up my alley. Are you ready to have your favorite carbs delivered right to your door? Be sure to check out Wild Grain so you can begin building your own box of artisanal breads and pastas and pastries. For a limited time, Wild Grain is offering our listeners $30 off their first box, plus free croissants in every box when you go to wildgrain.com/politicsgirl to start a subscription. Yes, you heard me. That is free croissants in every box and $30 off your first box when you go to wildgrain.com/politicsgirl. That's wildgrain.com/politicsgirl, and you can use my promo code politicsgirl at checkout. Who couldn't use a little fresh baked bread these days? Carb load us. The world is crazy. They're trying to work within our system still to stop us from getting them out of power. Does any of that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's exactly what's happening here. I would add to it that they're going to be challenged in the courts. But even if they're challenged in the courts, in the first instance, by promulgating an executive order like this, they're intimidating people, saying, don't show up. And a lot of people will be like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to vote. And they just won't go. But secondly, if it gets tied up in the courts, we've seen how Trump plays the courts, right? Which is delay, 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 delay. And so you'll get to 2026, you'll get to 2028, and there will be all sorts of grounds, specious, but nonetheless grounds based on all of these conflicts for them to say, oh, this, we can't count this. This, there are people here we're challenging, and, we're going to get all the election results caught up in this. And then on top of that, of course, who issues passports? The U.S. government. The State Department. Who runs the State Department? Marco Rubio. He's already demonstrated he'll do whatever Trump wants. And you can have already seen the slowdown in the issuing of passports anyway. Now, I'm not 100% sure that this passport thing is actually a genius idea, because I got kind of a feeling that more Democrats own passports than Republicans for a variety of reasons. But, as you say, it's illegal for non-citizens to vote already. It's entirely unnecessary. And it's part of a broader effort to say, we're going to make this difficult. We're not going to have mail voting. We're not going to allow you to count votes after the day that they're of the election, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of this is trying to entrench the minority that has elected Trump into power for as long as possible. When I say minority, I mean, even though he got more votes than Kamala Harris, he got fewer votes than half of the total number cast, and much fewer when you consider that half people didn't vote anyway. One of the problems we've got is they're trying to dismantle voting rights while they are dismantling our international alliances, while they are getting rid of science and healthcare in the US, while they are squeezing universities and shutting down the Department of Education, while they are rounding up people in the streets. And it's just very hard for the average person to know which direction to look. Now we've got JD Vance in Greenland because we're going to take over Greenland. I mean, insanity, right?
Yeah.
But that's where we are, and I just think it's real important for people to stay focused and to say, look, this is we've none of us have ever lived through this before. It's happened in lots of other countries, but none of us have lived through this before. And what we have to do is we have to wake up every morning and figure out how are we going to fight it, not just at the polls, but organizing, getting our voice out at the grassroots level. Because I think the story of the Trump administration at the grassroots level is terrible. And in any town in which you live, there are neighbors who have been fired. There are veterans who aren't going to get their operations that they need. There's Social Security recipients who are not going to be getting their money. There are people who are suffering because of these policies. And if we can put them in front of the school board, put them in front of the town council, put them in front of the county supervisors, town hall, put them in front of people at the local level, then we could actually produce the kind of results that will ultimately, force these guys from office. And by the
Yeah.
way, we're making some progress, right? The pulling Elise Stefanik's nomination to be UN ambassador is because they think she could lose in a district that was 60-40. And because they think that in the Mike Waltz district in Florida, which was also a very red district, they could lose. So their tiny 3-person margin in the House is hanging by a thread.
Well, let's pull that thread. Listen, here's the thing. You mentioned universities, right? So you're wearing your Columbia sweatshirt today for people who are just listening. David has a very long history with Columbia University. And talk to me about these universities capitulating to this regime, because it seems like your alma mater has decided to roll over for this administration, to cut their Middle Eastern study programs, to suspend students, to ban masks, to basically do anything the administration asks them to do to stay in his good graces. And I understand that Columbia gets funding from the federal government, but they're also a private institution and the oldest in America with a huge endowment, right? So they're not desperate for his money. And watching their behavior play out just feels like despicable cowardice to me. But this is your like educational home. Tell me how you feel about this and where you stand on this.
The reason I like coming on this podcast is because basically all I have to do is agree with you. And, it doesn't really require a lot of thinking. We think the same way, and I just like nod. I'm wearing a Columbia sweatshirt today because, I went to Columbia. I taught at Columbia. My grandfather went to Columbia. My great-grandfather went to Columbia. My parents went to Columbia. My kids went to Columbia. And so I have a lot of Columbia sweatshirts. In fact, all the blue sweatshirts I own are Columbia. And so this morning when I wanted to put on a blue sweatshirt, that's what I got, okay? But I could not be more embarrassed by the leadership at Columbia, or the lack of leadership of Columbia, their capitulation. They do have a very big endowment, and they could easily just say, "Go away. We're gonna handle this on our own." They're feeling some pressure from trustees in New York who may be supportive of Trump. There's residual bad feeling over some of the aspects of the protests that had to do with the Israeli-Gaza conflict. But I think it's a broader issue, and when the president of the University of Pennsylvania was forced out. The president of Harvard was forced out at the time of the protests regarding Gaza. I said, be careful. This is not about that. They're using it as an excuse. They want to pressure universities to teach what they want taught. And in the Columbia case, they've said, like, this is a department that needs to be shut down. We've already seen them stop funding for all sorts of medical research. We're, months away from RFK Jr. at HHS saying vaccines are bad. And we're going to start seeing that translated into things. The whole DEI campaign, across the country, all sorts of federal contractors have stopped referring to these things. That in the federal government, it's reached the point of ridiculousness that they took down references on the Department of Defense website to the plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima because it was called the Enola Gay, and they didn't want the word gay to appear anywhere. They took down references to Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier and is a great American hero, because they thought it was DEI related. And so take DEI, take anti-science, take the predicate of things around anti-Semitism, take all of these things together, and what do you have? You've got suppression of free speech. And university presidents should have gotten together and stood up and said, no way. So should law firms.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like, where's the unity? If all the universities stood together, they would be unstoppable. And it's the same thing with these law firms obeying in advance. I can't get my head around it. Like, if academia stood united against this and law firms stood united against this, they could actually make a difference, but they're all rolling over.
Well, not quite all of them. There was a law firm in the past 24 hours that said they would challenge them further. And the dean of Georgetown University Law School wrote a very good, strong letter, and he pushed back on this. But it's still disgusting that the vast majority of some of the most powerful institutions in the United States are obeying in advance. They're capitulating. They're bending the knee. And every time they do that, they send a message to Trump, which is, this works. Do more of it. It's appalling. And I got to tell you, by the way, another one of these things that really gets me, and I know, you and I both, despite the career twists that have brought us to where we are, both of us started off doing theater, is I'm really disgusted with the lack of response from the arts and cultural community. Where are the protests? Where are the shows? Where are the demonstrations? They have a platform. Why aren't they using the platform? They're just going along to get along. And I think that's terrible. The Kennedy Center. Why are they shutting down? Why do they take over the Kennedy Center? And, Lord knows who's going to be Kennedy Center honoree next year. Mel Gibson and,
Kid
Rock and Sly Stallone and right-wing politicians, right-wing actors. Lin-Manuel Miranda said, okay, we're not going to do Hamilton at the Kennedy Center.
Issa Rae, too, canceled her whole
Issa Rae
show.
and Rhiannon Giddens did also. But where is the rest of the power of that community? The power of unity? Why aren't students? Why aren't students demonstrating on campuses? Every time I'm frustrated about this, and I say on one of my podcasts or I say at a TV show, where are the protesters? They go, oh no, there were 35 of us outside a Tesla dealership. Come on, folks. In Belgrade, in Serbia, a couple of weeks ago, there were 1 million people protesting that government, which, by the way, the Trump administration supports that government and has a project there with that government, and Don Jr.'s over there a lot. But 1 million people. There are only 7 million Serbians, right? For 40 weeks, there were 250,000 people in the streets of Tel Aviv. There are protests in Georgia. There are protests in Hungary. And the United States is asleep at the switch. And people who listen to your podcast are like, no, I'm angry. I'm doing something. You're not doing enough. I don't care what you're doing. You're not doing enough, because we're going to lose this country. That we are at the point of no return. If they get one election cycle where they're not challenged or we lose the right to vote, they get another couple of years of this. This is going to be, from the point of view of our foundational institutions, they're all going to be rubble. And if you don't think it can happen here, it happens everywhere. It happens all around the world. That's human history. And it's time we wake up.
As you know, I have an amazing dog named Chips, and Chips eats Sundays for dogs. Now, my dog is a bit bougie and has very specific tastes. He won't eat what he's given all the time. He goes through moods with his food. But I will say that he always eats Sundays for dogs. Sundays is a fresh dog food made from a short list of human-grade ingredients. It was co-founded by Dr. Tori Waxman, a practicing veterinarian who tests and formulates every version of each recipe. Sundays contains 90% meat, 10% superfoods, and 0% synthetic nutrients and artificial ingredients. Dog parents have reported noticeable health improvements, including softer fur, fresher breath, better poops, and more energy after switching to Sundays. I noticed that my dog eats it, so I'm not wasting as much food because unlike other fresh dog foods, Sundays doesn't require refrigeration or preparation because of their air drying process, so you can just pour it and serve. Every order of Sundays ships right to your door, so you never have to worry about running out of dog food or going to the vet and getting in the parking lot. I keep it in the house and the office, so if Chips has decided he doesn't want his breakfast, it's right there with me for lunch. So if you have a dog that you love in your life, why not give Sundays for Dogs a try? You can get 40% off your first order at Sundays by going to sundaysfordogs.com/politicsgirl and using the code politicsgirl at checkout. I will tell you my Chips likes both the beef and the chicken flavor, so keep that in mind when you order. sundaysfordogs.com/politicsgirl. Picture this. Midday, I'm in the kitchen, putting away all the things my teenager forgot to put in the dishwasher, and my husband comes in from his office looking for mud water. My husband has become quite dedicated to mud water as a way to give him a natural boost midday rather than going with a coffee or tea. I get it. Coffee is a go-to for most people, but you can also get crazy jitters or an afternoon crash with it. But with mud water, it's different. It's a mix of cacao, chai, turmeric, and adaptogenic mushrooms to help you feel focused and balanced, not wired. It is smooth and steady and honestly helps you feel good. Plus, it's ridiculously easy to make. It takes about 2 minutes with hot water or milk and you're ready to get back to your day. If you are a matcha lover, the matcha starter kit is something you should really try. It's the perfect way to step into clean energy with matcha's calming, focused boost. Each ingredient in mud water serves a purpose. With organic ingredients for clean, natural boost, mud water's smooth, earthy flavors provide delicious and natural source of energy. Their OG blend contains cacao and chai for a hint of caffeine and hot chocolate-like flavor, lion's mane for focus, quadriceps to promote natural energy, and both chaga and reishi to support a healthy immune system. Mud water even has a caffeine-free blend if that's what you prefer. The best part of mud water is that it provides sustained energy without spikes or crashes. Ready to make a switch to clean energy? Head to mudwater.com and grab your starter kit today. Right now, our listeners are getting an exclusive deal of up to 43% off your entire order, plus free shipping and a free rechargeable frother when you use the code PoliticsGirl. That's right, up to 43% off with the code PoliticsGirl at mudwater.com. And after you purchase, they'll ask how you found them. Please support the show and let them know we sent you. Keep your energy natural and refreshing all year long with Mud Water, because life is too short for anything less than clean, delicious energy. That's Mud Water. mudwtr.com.
And it's time we wake up.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I think people are afraid. I think like you said, it's happened all over the world, but it's never happened here before. But I think people need to be aware that we're 60 days in and we're already at state sanctioned kidnapping, right? Like we're using the Alien Enemies Act from 1798 to, send people, as we were saying earlier, to prisons in El Salvador, where they're known for their human rights violations. That is basically American gulags. That's what we're doing. We're already there.
And people are saying they're afraid, and I'm saying, get over it.
Yeah.
Fear is what they use in order to get what they want done. And does that mean you're going to have to sacrifice? Does that mean you might expose yourself? Does that mean you might lose some kind of business? Does that mean that they might come after you? Yeah. But unless we flick the switch in our brains and say, okay, I'm willing to take that. I say to people, you shouldn't own a Tesla. And they're like, well, I own a Tesla and it's a pain in the ass to have to go and sell it and whatever. And it's like, so? Do you understand what you're supporting? Do you understand what you're backing here? Do you understand that you actually have leverage? That when you don't support those businesses, when you make them hurt, you send a strong message that it's possible that grassroots solidarity is ultimately going to carry the day. And, you're one of the things I love about you and your show is, you're always talking about the base truths of American democracy. And the base truth in American democracy is that they're not just three branches of government. There's an executive and there's a judiciary and there's a legislative branch, and all of those are compromised right now. But this is not like England was when we broke away from it, where the sovereign was the king. And it's not like Trump thinks it is, where he thinks he's the sovereign. The sovereign in our system is us. It's the people. Trump works for us. The government works for us. And so it's up to us to accept our role in governance and fight for that. And that's where we are right now.
Yeah, there's going to be a mass protest around the country on April 5th, being organized by the Indivisible people and a bunch of other groups who have gotten involved. And I hope to see a lot of people on the street on that day. I think that the country's size works against us in this way, because I think, like, if we lived in a country the size of France, we could all get to Paris, within 3 hours. If we lived
there were 1 million people in Washington 2 days after Trump was inaugurated the last time, for the 1 Million Woman March. We've done it before. We can do it again.
Absolutely. I was at the LA protest after Trump was inaugurated in the Women's March, and there were 750,000 of us just in LA alone. I think the thing is that was, if I may say, it was women who organized that. And women have been kicked in the teeth twice watching their candidate lose to the worst man in the universe. And I think we're looking for leadership. You were talking earlier about Democrats not standing up and not being in the right place and not being the leaders we need in this moment as an opposition. I think there has been this very slow addressing of where we actually are. I watched from the election to inauguration thinking that the Democratic president and their administration would be doing something to protect us from what was coming. And I kept thinking they must have a bigger plan. They're not just going to let this monster just come in. And it seemed like, okay, no. Then we had the inauguration. You're like, okay, well, the Democrats have to be prepared to be, the very vocal opposition to this. They have to act the way Mitch McConnell would. They have to get in the way and obstruct and be in everyone's face and cameras saying, this is outrageous and we can't do this and this is against the Constitution. Nothing, right? We get one opportunity to stand up with the continued resolution and say, we're not voting for any of this. You're trying to ruin the American people. You're firing half of America. You got this unelected billionaire with his Doge doing the dumbest stuff with big balls over here. We're not doing it. And we see Chuck Schumer flip. And I think a lot of people who are seeking leadership are like, what do we do? I am panicking and I don't know what to do. And I know I should do something. And I'm watching people be picked up off the street. I think we are slow on the uptake, without a doubt.
I agree with you 100%. We are slow on the uptake, and it's time to, recognize that Chuck Schumer's passed his sell-by date, and it's time to recognize the leaders that have emerged, whether it's AOC or, frankly, Bernie Sanders or Jasmine Crockett or Governor Pritzker or some of the other people who are able to speak clearly about it. Boston Mayor Wu or Jamie Raskin on a regular basis.
Yeah, Chris Murphy's doing great work.
There are people out there, but a lot of people still, the switch hasn't gone off in their head.
I know.
And said, I could lose it all. It's like, the house is on fire. Chuck Schumer and John Fetterman and, there are 5 Democrats who voted for 10 of Trump's nominees. They're like, oh, the house is on fire. Let's make some wars. The rest of us have got to say, the house is on fire. And it's not, what should I do? It's do everything. Use the platform you've got to change opinions and to share the truth. Get out and protest where you can protest. Donate whatever funds you've got to candidates that matter. Go to your town council. Go to your board of education. Go to participate in an active way in local politics. Write leaders, email leaders, organize boycotts, participate in boycotts. Do it all, because time's running out. I totally share your frustration with this, because the Dems have been asleep at the switch for the most part. Some of the core leaders. It's, the scene in The Godfather, too often quoted. Michael Corleone turns to Robert Duvall's character and says, you're not a wartime consigliere. We need wartime consiglieres. We need people who are ready to be the opposition to a fascist government and not the people who want to be the minority party in a functioning democracy, because that's not what we've got. We're not there. That's the past. Podcasts like your podcast play a really important role. You've got a big following, and every single one of those people could make a big difference because you've got a following of tens of thousands of people, and each one of those people has a following too of hundreds or of thousands. And if you take the multiplier effect, that's millions of people. And if they become active people, millions of people active will make the difference in this election and this country, and sending a message to the government that no, we're just not going where you want to go.
Yeah, no, I just keep thinking the Politics Girl podcast is produced, as people know, by my husband, Sean, and he owns a production company called Happy Warrior Entertainment. He just produced a piece with Timothy Snyder's words from On Tyranny. And you go through all of it, and we're going to release it coming out because it's such an important moment that people aren't getting. And the first lesson in On Tyranny is do not obey in advance, which most people know. But right after that, it says most power that authoritarian governments get is freely given. The people make an assessment of what they think they're going to be asked for, and they give it in advance. They say, like, that's what the universities are doing. That's what these law firms are doing. That's what the people in many ways are doing. They're like, what are they going to need me to do? I'll do it so that I'm not in trouble. But the thing is that if you think that what's happening to the people who are, say, green card holders or visa holders or wear a hijab, and that's not you, so why would that happen to you? This kind of thing. If you think what's happening to these people around America right now can't happen to you because you're a citizen and they're not, you're mistaken. Once you start snatching people off the street for having the wrong opinion, for writing an op-ed, for being a national security threat, you are opening the door to something you can't close, something terrible you can't close. And I think about Timothy Snyder and his work and how he and he's just come out with he and two of his Yale colleagues have decided to leave Yale and go to Toronto and work at the University of Toronto instead because of what's happening in this country. And he said, if you accept that non-citizens have no right to due process, then you are accepting that citizens have no right to due process, because all the government has to do is claim you're not a citizen. And without due process, you have no chance to prove the contrary. Like, I keep thinking of people being like, well, they'll be like, are you a citizen? And I'm like, yeah, here's my ID. And they're like, whoops, I dropped it. Prove you're a citizen. And you're like, but you have my ID. And they're like, stop resisting. Like, this is how quickly it can happen, right? I think we have a real lack of imagination in this country because it's never happened to us, because we've lived in like the hot tub warm water of like safe democracy for so long that we can't imagine things going badly for us. But things are already going badly. We need to have a far bigger imagination for how authoritarianism works, and understand that this whole concept of saying, but that's not legal, is meaningless in the face of people who don't care about legality, who don't care about the rule of law.
Or who are willing to twist legality, right? So if you, the Attorney General, say that protesting outside a Tesla dealership is domestic terrorism, that's bad, right? But if she then says, I can use my special powers to fight terrorism against you because you're a protester, that's worse. And if they can say to somebody, oh, we have these special wartime powers that allow us to throw people out of the country, there's no war.
We're not at war with Venezuela. What are you talking about? Yeah.
But, it's like there's no invasion on the southern border. That's bullshit. But what they're trying to do is to find a predicate in order to enable them to use power in an undemocratic, outside the rule of law way. And if they can use it against them, they can use it against you. And if you're listening to this podcast, if you're spending an hour of your week listening to this podcast every week, you've got a target on your back. Doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to the podcast. It means you should understand your role in this society, because they will find an excuse. They will, this is the president who wanted to use live fire against BLM protesters in 2020.
Yeah. The whole goal is to keep us afraid, because that keeps us controlled. and then they chip away at our rights until they're gone, and we can't allow it. If anything, you should embrace your annoying, mouthy American spirit at this moment. That thing that makes people around the world go, oh, Americans, they're so loud and annoying. Do that, but in service of your country right now. Do that in service of the Constitution. Do that in service of the rule of law. Because like you said, it's only going to get worse if we don't.
Be more like Lee.
I'm in my insufferable bitch era. This is where we're at.
May we all get there.
Listen, before you go, I just have to ask you about the drama that Trump administration is trying to bury right now, but we have to keep attention on. And it's what people are calling Signalgate, right? And if you don't mind, I just want your thoughts on it because it's so ridiculous. And if people don't know what I'm talking about when I say Signalgate, this is this story right now where top U.S. officials, we're talking the vice president, the secretary of defense, the secretary of state, the national security advisor, the director of national intelligence, the CIA director, the Treasury secretary, the White House chief of staff, the deputy chief of staff, and a special envoy to the Middle East. We're all kind of yucking it up on a messaging service called Signal, which is not a secured line, discussing sensitive military plans, including times and locations of Air Force attacks in Yemen, right? And they accidentally added an Atlantic journalist to the chain who was like, shit, am I on a private chain talking about war plans? And he waited and then he was like, oh, I should remove myself. I'm probably like breaking some law being here. And then he realized that this should never have been done. And all of these people who should know way better shouldn't be doing this. And it has come out to the forefront now. And now we are all aware that this happened. And we go, okay, well, if they're doing this for the Yemen attack, what else are they on a Signal chat for? What else of our national secrets are out there in the ether? These people are completely incompetent. Why are they in charge? And the Trump administration is trying to say, this isn't a big deal. Who cares? Democrats are so ridiculous. Why are you trying to make this such a big deal? And I think the thing is that this actually is a giant big deal. And it is not a partisan big deal. This is these people cannot run our government because everyone is in danger big deal. And I would really love to know your thoughts on where that is before I have you go.
I mean, my thoughts are, again, roughly where yours are. This is a big deal. It represents an incredible breach of security. It represents unbelievable recklessness and irresponsibility on part of the top officials in the Trump National Security Cabinet. Particularly egregious are the National Security Advisor for inviting Jeff Goldberg onto the chat, but especially Secretary of Defense Hegseth for posting the information that, had it leaked out, could have led to the deaths of American pilots or intelligence operatives or others, because they were telling in advance where we were going and what we were doing and how we were getting there and what kind of weapons we were using. The administration had, and by the way, the director of national intelligence and the director of CIA were on this thread. And at no point did they say, hey, guys, stop, don't do this. At no point. Either this information was classified, which by every definition, DOD definition, broader US government definitions, it should have been, or by not classifying it, they were making an even more egregious mistake in terms of security. And by the way, there's a lot of talk, about attack plans, but there was a lot of other stuff on this discussion thread that is also the kind of thing that is typically classified. First of all, high-level discussions like this are always classified because they give you a sense of where administration policies may go. But you had the vice president saying, I'd like to squeeze the Europeans. The Secretary of Defense going, yeah, I join you in your loathing of European freeloading. That would be classified because that's incredibly inflammatory kind of perspectives on these things. You have people on this chat celebrating when apparently a bomb blew up and killed a lot of civilians. That is pretty horrible, but would also have been classified for a variety of other reasons. So, you have incompetent people or you have reckless people. You have people who don't care what gets out there to our enemies, or you have people saying, maybe it's okay if the enemies get this stuff. And atop this whole pyramid, you have Donald Trump, who gave classified information to the Russians in May of 2017 in the Oval Office. You have Donald Trump, who stole classified documents, hid them in his house, lied to the FBI about those documents, mishandled them. You have Donald Trump, who is trying to suppress, fire people from the government. Anybody who said he had ties to the Russians, they're being fired. Any initiative that protected us from that kind of compromising tie is being eliminated. It's all part of a pattern which should make you actually think the worst. You should make them think, why would Donald Trump hire such incompetent people? Maybe it was intentional. Maybe this is the kind of thing that they think weakens us, and that plays well with his autocrat friends elsewhere. I don't know about the last part, but it's worth considering. But this is not something that should go away. In any other time, in any other government, Waltz would be fired, Hegseth would be fired, and Ratcliffe and Gabbard should be worried about their jobs.
Yeah, no, this is not how any of this works. It's shady as hell. Honestly, if anyone else did this, a soldier, someone who works in security, someone who works in an embassy, they wouldn't just be fired. They would probably be court-martialed and quite probably jailed, honestly. But the idea that these top guys are top security guys, including the vice president of the United States, are trying to pretend this is no big deal is nauseating. And it should really make people very, very concerned for our safety and the safety of our national security.
Yeah. And by the way, Pam Bondi said, "Oh, we're not going to investigate this." And that,
terrific.
That is but it's another problem, right? The Attorney General isn't doing her job. The Department of Justice isn't doing its job in ensuring that our laws are enforced, because she views herself as the personal attorney of the president. So take the immunity, take the pardon power, take a Congress that's supine, and add to it people, senior places in the administration, who are enabling the law breaking as opposed to upholding their oaths to the Constitution. And that's how you get in the situation we've been talking about for the past hour.
Yeah. And exactly why the Senate should never have approved any of these people to be in his cabinet. That's exactly why the Senate is supposed to, consider carefully who the president is surrounding himself with. And they didn't. They just rubber stamped everyone who is incompetent and compromised. And I think it's just given people like China and Russia and Iran and North Korea just like butterflies in their stomach with joy. There's no way they can't be just absolutely thrilled with what we're doing. Honestly, I'm going to go back to Steve Schmidt. He said that like everyone in the American government right now is just a comic book villain brought to life. Like he calls them a poisonous pack of fools, a real life Team America World Police, and a disgusting, ugly spectacle. And I thought, yep, that sounds exactly right to me.
It is exactly right.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, David. I love talking to you. Clearly, we are in a crisis, but every autocrat in history has attempted to do this, to consolidate power by weakening the courts, to suppress votes, to silence their opposition. But they only succeed when the public is complacent. And that's what you're talking about, right? So these people can only win if we give up. So we really have to stay focused and engaged and continue to fight back every single day.
Totally agree. Always love to come here to visit you. It hasn't left me upbeat, but it has left me energized.
Oh, good. That's what we need. We need a little energy, if not happiness.
Yes.
So that was David Rothkopf reminding us that this administration is actively seeking to destroy everything we know, and we can't allow it. That we are a nation built on causing a ruckus. So the good citizens of America have to do that now. We cannot check out. We have to recommit to the principles of truth and justice and freedom and stand up and fight for them. That the Trump administration, like fascist nations before it, is waging a systemic war against facts and intelligence, against the rule of law and elections, against our very sense of agency and power within a nation we thought we knew. But I want to remind you that these people are not untouchable. If Signalgate taught us anything, it's that these people are incompetent. They are stupid and greedy and vicious. And while they will clearly do anything to hold on to power, we have to be willing to do anything to hold them off. It is a heartbreaking and scary moment in our country's history, but it is a truth we must acknowledge if we want to see our way through it. I want to thank David for joining us today and you for caring enough about democracy to be here. Now go out and fight back. Give them no reason to believe their takeover will be easy, because we are coming for them. Until next week. Peachy out. Before you go, I just want to thank the premium members of this podcast. and encourage those who aren't members to consider supporting this work. Independent voices are the ones really bringing you the truth right now. And in today's political landscape, we do it in danger. So if you aren't a member of Politics Girl Premium, please go to politicsgirl.com and consider signing up. You will get this podcast ad-free, along with my rants and bonus content sent directly to your inbox. So even if my work is silenced on social media, you will still get access to the truth and information you need. There is a link to sign up in the bio of this episode, but also at politicsgirl.com. And as always, please like and share this podcast so we can grow the audience. The more people who have access to real information, the more effective we will be at defeating these people who would destroy our country. As always, thank you for your time and support. Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, in partnership with the Midas Media Network, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.